Do you mind telling us your first name?
Yeah, my name's Cait.
Could you tell us what your dreams were as a kid?
I had lots of dreams. In my pre-K, we had a list of like what you wanted to be when you grew up, and I had like a dozen or more things on that list. I wanted to be a dancer. I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to be a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. So, but I think mostly my dreams revolved around performing and, being in front of people and sharing creativity with others.
Could you tell us a little bit about your childhood and your relationship with your parents?
I had a great childhood, things were really, really, pretty simple. I grew up in the hill country of Texas, and my mom and my dad both worked in Austin, and so they would commute up there. And my mom, it was really important to her that my sister and I got to do any sort of extracurriculars that we wanted to do because she didn't have that opportunity as a kid. So I was always in some sort of dance class, or for a while I was doing competitive figure skating and, volleyball and all kinds of things. So, it was really nice to have that. My sister is 6.5 years older than me, and my parents split up when I was 12, and that felt like a very definite ending to childhood. Mm-hmm. That's kind of when I feel like I really had to start growing up quick. It was at 12 when they separated. But up until there, it was, I certainly could tell that my parents were not, always fond of each other. But for the most part, things were relatively peaceful, and a house full of music. So,
if you could describe your relationship with your dad, how would you describe it as?
My relationship with my dad in the beginning, especially those first 12 years and a little bit beyond, very, very close, very loving, very warm. We communicated through music. We communicated through deep conversations, even when I was, 9 years old. We had a real closeness and a bond. He always said that we were two peas in a pod, and that, he always made me feel very just loved and very warm and accepted for who I was.
And what about after the 12-year mark?
After that, things got complicated. He remarried a woman when I was around 14 or so. And I knew this woman. She had worked with my dad and me. I started working with my dad in downtown Austin at 14 as receptionist, and that was really fun. So I knew of this woman, but I didn't know that they had dated or that they, or anything like that. But all of a sudden one day they were married, and she was living in his apartment. And I didn't take that well as a 14-year-old, but also this woman was, she was very manipulative, and my dad was very easily manipulated. So things got very, very complicated with my dad after that. And I made a decision at age 16 to cease contact with him for probably about 13, 14 years, somewhere around there.
How was that?
The hardest thing that I've ever had to do in my life. This woman was very intentionally cruel to me. She was very threatened by other women. Even though we were, I was his daughter and my sister, she was very threatened by any other, especially female presence. And so that felt horrifying for a teenage girl to lose her dad in front of her eyes like that, to be told that she's, that I'm so special, that I'm, we're two peas in a pod, and we're, we have this unbreakable bond. And then she came in and made things very difficult. And she was very narcissistic and very, I think hurt people. And I think she was very, very hurt.
What about your relationship with your mom? How was that for you?
Growing up, it was good, but it was more, my mom worked a lot, she was the breadwinner of our family. She was a nurse, so she worked a lot of 12-hour shifts, and she was always so supportive. We didn't have as close of a bond as my dad and I did, but after my dad, abandoned me, she and I got much closer. And she saw me through some really dark and very sad times and traumas, and so we grew closer in a different way, because she was there to help me pick up the pieces.
What's the biggest thing you learned from your parents, good or bad?
I think I learned different things from my parents because they were so different themselves. With my dad, I learned, the biggest thing that I learned was that there's more to life than what's just on the surface. That music is a whole other language of its own. My mom taught me that, the value of being independent, the value of sticking up for yourself, even when we don't agree on those things. I think those are the biggest things that I've learned from my parents.
Can you tell us about your first love and how that felt?
I think music has to be my first love, and my lifelong love. I found music pretty early on and found that I was a natural and gifted singer, and so I could feel all of the emotions, even the ones that I was too little to have yet. I could experience those and view those through a musical lens, and it was like a whole, universal language of its own, and way of expression. Music has saved me. It's also hurt me at times. When I was in the 5th grade, I sang Strawberry Fields Forever by the Beatles at the 5th grade talent show. And the room full of 5th graders did not get that. They did not understand what it was that I was doing. But my dad was there. Yeah. And to him, I was the coolest kid in the room. And so it was a song that I felt very deeply, even at 10 years old. So it taught me, just kind of like my dad did, that there's more to life than what's on the surface. There's so many layers of music. There's so many different sonics and elements that go in to create a beautiful piece of musical expression.
Can you tell us about your first loss or heartbreak and how that felt?
I think the first real loss that I had And the heartbreak that I associated with that was my dad. He married this other woman and very quickly changed the makeup and what our relationship looked like and felt like and sounded like, because we were monitored and controlled. So we could only say certain things and, be on the phone certain hours or during, he could only say so much if she was clearly in the background. And that was so hard to lose him, because it changed my foundation and understanding of what love was. You're supposed to be able to count on the fact that your parents will always love you. But that wasn't the case for me, not really. My dad made me a promise at a very young age that he could not keep, which was that, he told me after he and my mom split up that he would never marry anyone who didn't love me as much as he did, as much as he loved me. And that's a very big promise to a young girl who is just coming into her own and understanding who she is, and to then break that promise. And the hard part, I think the hardest part, is that I had to break up with him myself. He most definitely abandoned me emotionally, but I had to physically, at 16, understand that these people in my life were poisonous and that I was not going to be able to grow up and thrive or even live if I let them continue to make my life a tailspin when I'm just trying to grow up at 16. So I made that decision. And so in a way, I think a lot of times I've always framed it as, he left me, he abandoned me, I wasn't enough for him. But really, I made that decision to save myself. And even though that came with a lot of fallout later on in life, I'm still glad that I did it for myself.
Who would you say first taught you love, and how?
I think I most associate love with my dad. We're talking about people in your immediate family. But something else that makes me think of love is acknowledgement, I think, is really important in love. Being able to acknowledge and connect with someone and see someone for who they are. And when I was a very little girl, I was at we were up here in Austin, and at my dad's spiritual practice. We're congregating, we're gathering here and in Austin, and I was pretty little. I'm sure I was maybe 7 or 8, and I was a really chatty kid. And I talked to this woman named Roxy, who unfortunately is not here with us anymore, but I guess she and I were just talking for a really long time after their service ended. And my dad told me that he went up to Roxy and said, like, you were talking to this, 7, 8-year-old for probably 20 minutes. Like, what were you talking about? And I'm sure he apologized, like, sorry, my kid is intense. But Roxy replied, she has a lot to say. And that to me feels like love. That feels like acknowledgement, love in action. She could see that there was so much more to me than just a little kid to be dismissed. That's love.
How do you define love?
Love is acknowledgement. Love is action. Love in action. You do things not just because they better you, but they better the ones that you care about most in life, and that protects them. You protect them with your love in action.
What's a good day look like for you?
A good day looks like a day where I get up with relative ease, no heart palpitations, no cloudy thoughts first thing in the morning, and I'm able to go on about my day, get in some playtime with my kitties, and usually somewhere in there is some sort of place or space to express myself creatively. A lot of times that looks like me being in community with other people and singing with other people and talking and having deep conversations with other people. That's a good day for me.
On the flip side of that, what's a bad day look like, and how do you navigate those bad days?
Before I can even open my eyes, I can feel my heart rate raising and my cortisol levels shooting through the roof. That's a bad day. Worrying about what's going to happen or not happen in the future. Worrying about things in the past that are coming back to bite me. Those are bad days. Those are days where usually my anxiety prevails and I can't go do things that make me happy, even though I know they'll make me feel better. Bad days are days where my anxiety wins. Bad days are days where my trauma defines me.
Do you just let those bad days kind of go by, or do you use any tools to better navigate them?
I think the best way that I know how to heal my pain is through creative expression. So I try to do something, write. I try to sing something, even if it's just to myself. But I also try to connect with others who I know hold space for me. I try to be very cognizant that I put up walls pretty quickly whenever I'm feeling anxious, when I'm feeling on the defense, when I'm in that fight or flight or freeze mode. But I try to really have a lot of compassion for myself. Try to make myself some tea, inhale the deliciousness and the scent of the tea leaves. I try to be grateful for where those tea leaves came from and how they made it into my cup. And I try really hard to just be present.
What's been a humbling experience for you?
I think something that's been humbling for me, especially in this last year, has just been, dating has been really humbling. Because of a lot of the things that I experienced with my dad, and then later on in college when I was sexually assaulted, I was single for a lot of my adult life. A lot of that by choice. But I decided in 2022 that I wanted to see if romantic love could be a thing. So I went on this experiment, and I went on all these dates in 2022 for the first time in my life, really. And so I went from like no experience to now I am an expert dater. I have all the experience. But becoming that expert at dating was really humbling. I dated someone who love bombed me and who made me believe that I was everything. so that they could keep stringing me along and having fun with me. That was really humbling. And I felt not only humbled, but I felt silly. I felt naive, and ashamed that I thought that I could get close to someone and that they would appreciate me for everything that I am, because it took me a long time to get some of that self-confidence back. And then when it didn't work out and it turned out that this person was just using me, I really had to, once I stopped sobbing, I really had to recalculate in my life and kind of reevaluate what I was missing. Because what I was missing was not love from a romantic partner. That's not the end-all be-all of life for me. Romantic relationships are not the end-all be-all of life for me. It can't be, because if it is, and that's the standard of whether or not you've succeeded or failed in life, then I've failed at life. But I don't think that that's the case. I don't agree with that. That's just one type of love that I have yet to fully experience. But getting to that place where I had to, where I let my guard down and I was vulnerable, and then to have that not work out and be turned around on you, that was really, really humbling.
How'd you navigate that once, I guess, when things started going south? How did that?
I knew that my feelings were intensifying for this person day by day. And so I said, hey, I want to have a pulse check, see where we are, make sure we're both going in a forward motion here. And that's when they told me, oh, I'm not staying in town after my lease is up in a couple months. And I think you might be into this more than I am, even though they had fed me a lot of future talk and really made me believe that they were about what I was about. So I didn't handle it the best in the moment, because in the moment I froze, because that survival instinct kicks in. And so the last he saw of me, I was this wounded bird, crying. But what happened after that, and after I reevaluated and recalculated what my needs and wants out of life and other people are, I realized that it's time for me to fully realize my own destiny as an artist and as a creative. That's what I'm here to do, is express myself. So I got some really good ideas about some of the things and tools that I had while this person and I were dating, like little playlists that I made. And now I'm writing a one-woman show about it, and about my 2022 experience, and about that, and what I found on the other side of trauma and disappointment and sadness, which is your own artistic expression, your own inner expression, giving space and holding space for deep emotions and feelings and connections, and being in community, being with other people who are like-minded, who hold you. And I realized that for a long time, especially with my family situation kind of dissolving at age 12, the family that I kind of knew anyway, I'd been trying to belong in so many different places. And sometimes I belonged in those places, but other times I didn't belong in those places. And when I didn't belong in those places and I was trying to fit my square peg into that round hole, you know, I got really hurt. I was raped when I was trying to be in a group of people who didn't really want me there to begin with, but that I felt that I had to prove my worth and my coolness and my essence to. And then I was taken advantage of. And then I was threatened into silence. And that is something that, you know, I now know that no one should have to go through, and that I didn't deserve, and that I didn't, you know, cause. However, now I am much more mindful about who I keep company with. And that is people who are intentional with their living, with their feelings, intentional with their own creativity, their own callings in life, and people who I can show up exactly as I am, anxious, scared, excited, joyful, all of those things. I can show up there entirely myself and be healed by a community presence. It's not necessarily about putting all of your hopes and dreams and wishes and everything into one person. It's about being supported by multiple people who do many different things for you. It's not about being codependent with one person. It's about being a part of something greater.
What's one of the hardest things you've been through?
The passing of my dad. As I mentioned before, I made the decision at 16 to stop talking to him. His wife made things very difficult for me as a kid. And my dad did something that really, really betrayed my trust. And I didn't see any positive path forward with that. So years go on. I move away from my dad. I stopped singing. I grew up a singer. But when my dad and my relationship dissolved, I wanted to run away from everything that reminded me of him, physically and everything else. So I moved across the country to Northeast Ohio, which I still love that place. But so I ran away from him physically, but I also stopped singing because I associated my talent and my gift with my dad because he nurtured that when I was a little girl. But I stopped singing, and so I really shut myself off for many years and limited myself. And then my dad had a heart attack when I was in my mid-20s. I still was not moved. I was still very stubborn and did not want to open the door because I still felt so angry and so deceived and betrayed. And then a year after his heart attack, he was diagnosed with brain cancer. And I realized that our time together on this earth, whether we share it or not, is coming to a close. So I got a job that brought me back down to Texas, still a little bit further from him, but where I could, be there within a day to see him if need be. And we started trying to kind of mend fences, make amends. But then When my dad started actively dying and the tumor expanded, and there was no operating, there was no coming back. It was very aggressive at that point. We had really limited time left together, and my dad's wife was very closely controlling what kind of time we would have and if we would be alone or not. And one of those times when we were alone, my dad asked, and he had brain cancer, so words were going, and he's a very, very smart, very articulate man, always so well read and so well spoken, but he struggled to find words. And he was kind of gesturing and kind of, talking about how, we're alluding to the fact that my sister had, recently gotten married, and they had a son at the time, one son at the time. And he kind of gestured to me and said, well, what about you? We need to get you taken care of. And I had to look this dying man in his face and tell him through tears that I, also trying not to say directly, you caused this, but that I just had to tell him I had had a lot of emotional problems for a long time, and I wasn't with anybody, and he looked at me in my eyes and he said, I hate that. And I knew that that was him trying to say, I'm sorry for my part in that. And that was really hard to see that. It was also really hard just a few short days later when he was in the ER restrained because he had gotten aggressive, and then the police were called. That's a whole other confusing story, but I was with my dad in the ER where he did not need to be. He needed to be in hospice. And he was restrained to the bed. And he was so confused and could not understand where he was or why he was there. And he looked up at me and he said, I thought I would be dead already. And I had to, as simply as possible, explain to him, Dad, we have a little bit further to go on this journey. Because he was expecting to drop dead at any moment at that point. Mm-hmm. And that whole experience of him, that month-ish, maybe a little bit longer experience where he was at his home and then later in the ER on a psych hold, and then later finally into a hospice situation. That was earth-shattering. And what came after, I think we got as much closure as we could. Some people get none, so I'm very grateful for the little bit of closure that he and I had before he passed, but there is no, you can pick up the phone and call him and cuss him out if you want to, or tell him you love him. There is no possibility of a hug in the future, or a loving embrace, or even a fight. All the possibilities just stop. And it changed me profoundly. to be in this life now, not because of a choice without my dad, but because he just is not alive anymore, you know? And that was really hard for me to grapple with for many years.
How's it changed you moving forward, or from that point moving forward? What were some of the profound change?
Well, I was not okay for a long time, even though I'm kind of on the outside I was. And even then, maybe not so much on the outside, but I was really broken for a long time. I was really heartbroken. And I tried to get to a place, and I think that I have gotten to this place where you accept that this person who is imperfect, this father who was supposed to love me all the days of his life and those of mine, I don't forget any of the things that he put me through. I don't forget any of the things that I did to him. I honor that by honoring his legacy, which is being a person who expresses themselves creatively through music, who also looks further into life for deeper connections and for deeper meaning, and finding love, I think, in a different way. I've found that love is not just, one man, one woman, your boyfriend and girlfriend, then you're engaged, then you're married, then that's it. It's a lot different than that. Love is a lot of different things. It's a lot of different people. It's a lot of different places. And I think I honor him by exploring my heart's full capacity for love.
That was beautiful. So for the next question, if you can go in your mind and think, this life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual. Can you tell us about a time in your life that you relate to the word war? And if it was what you just stated, we can go another direction.
I think it would probably be similar to what I just talked about. Yeah.
If you can go in your mind and think, this life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual. Can you tell us about a time in your life that you relate to the word peace?
Yeah. I was living in Akron, Ohio at the time, and I was living a very queer life at the time with my friends, and really, really had found myself in the queer community within Akron, and found myself and friends there, and found my voice again for the first time in many years. And it was the day that DOMA was overturned, so the Defense of Marriage Act. So essentially the Supreme Court had ruled that gay marriage was legal. And I felt so excited, and the people that I worked with who were also gay, we were all just, we couldn't believe it, It felt like the possibilities were so limitless at the time. I was really happy for what this meant for a lot of my friends and their love. And but I also felt like really a deep sadness because I couldn't share why I was so happy with my mom, because I hadn't told her that I was queer or bisexual. And so maybe not in the best way, but I called her and I told her that because I couldn't hold it in for another single second. Mm-hmm. And so I did that day. And then that night, with me and all of my friends, it was a Wednesday, which meant it was karaoke night. So, so we went down to the club and to celebrate this momentous time in history. And I sang Lady Gaga's Born This Way, and the whole bar was singing with me. And that feeling is true peace for me. It's also joy. It's deep, joyful passion. But it felt like for a moment we were all connected, like we were all one beating heart in that gay bar in Akron. And we were all singing together, and we were all full of hope. And that felt like peace.
Can you tell us about a truly difficult time in your life, how it felt, how you endured?
I think this last year has been really difficult. I've been through some difficult years in my life, for sure. But this year, I think, this past year anyway, has been transformative because I've learned so much about myself. I dated a whole lot, so I have a lot more self-awareness and understanding about what I want out of life, out of my friends, out of partners, out of my own everyday existence. And it also last year was really difficult because it was like all of these major shifts and changes and endings were happening all at once. I left a really toxic job environment that I was not happy at, that I was not valued at, and that was difficult. And coming to that realization was difficult. I had a back injury. I lost my last grandparent, my dad's mother, Rose, my Meemaw. And that was hard because I watched her bury her firstborn son, my dad. And watching the anguish on her face and her experience that was so hard. And now her life, she was transitioning out of here, and I didn't get to say the goodbyes that I wanted to in the ways that I wanted to. And it was all of this change, all an ending and chaos, all kind of happening at once. But I endured by listening to my creativity, to listening to the little ideas that I had in my head and writing them down and talking to other people about them. And I endured by putting myself in creative spaces with like-minded people, with other women, where I could be heard, I could express my feelings freely, I could be creative and sing. And that has opened up so many doors for me. And so even though that this past year was the most transformative year full of change for me, I feel like I have really endured and I have really learned how to thrive by putting myself in spaces where people don't just tolerate you being there, they want you there. And you're encouraged to take up space, as much or as little of that as you have capacity for.
What's one of the happiest moments in your life?
Definitely the Lady Gaga Born This Way thing in Akron, but I would say that's probably the happiest moment of my life, that gives me instant joy and just sends all the tingles through my body. But I would say realizing that I am right where I need to be. Sometimes it's easy to feel really disconnected from this world, really lost in this world, really unsure of where you are in this world. But then there are those moments, even if they're fleeting, even if they're small, where things just seem to make sense and line up. And I've experienced a lot of those kind of moments lately, where I'm in community with others. I'm in spaces of safety and free expression with others. And that's everything.
Is that what inspires you?
Mm-hmm. I think what inspires me really is my own resilience. I am resilient as hell. And I'm really inspired by other people who are too. I'm really inspired by people who have kept on despite the odds. I'm inspired by my own ability to be there for myself, my own ability to be everything that I need to be, but also be vulnerable and realistic enough to know when I need others and that I need others. That's what inspires me.
What keeps you up at night?
Capitalism. Capitalism keeps me up at night, wondering what my future holds, how I can affect that, how I feel helpless against that, how the world seems to be changing in really new and scary ways. That keeps me up at night.
What keeps you going every day?
My own little engine that's sometimes buried really deep down inside there. That keeps me going. Music keeps me going. Art keeps me going. Expression keeps me going. Humanity keeps me going. Stories of humanity. Good documentaries of people who have overcome the odds. And people who do things from deep down in their soul. I really see that. And I'm anxious to see as much authenticity in art in life as I can and create some of that of my own.
Imagine you're in the hospital today with only hours to live. What would be your regrets, if any?
My regrets would probably be maybe unrequited love, and not necessarily romantic love, but love of my family. We have a different family dynamic than I think some other people do. I think that would probably worry me at the end of my life is, did I do enough? Did I love enough? Did I try enough?
So you're alive and well. Do you feel that you can be at peace, make amends, or with that regret or those regrets you just stated?
I hope so. I want to keep trying to find family in life. And whether that's blood family and whether that's chosen family or a combination of the two. I think I can absolutely love more, and I try really hard to lean in as much as I can with love and gratitude and understanding and acknowledgement of the people in my life who sometimes it's hard to love and hard to understand.
What are your dreams now?
They're a lot like what they were when I was a kid. Because of this last crazy year, I've really come into my own and understood that I am an artist, and my gift in life is singing, and that's what I really want to do with my life. I don't really have any aspirations of becoming famous or wealthy because of my voice, but my dreams are to be able to afford living life, just to be able to be stable in some sense, but to be using my voice every day, my singing voice, my speaking voice, and nourishing that creative soul inside me, because that's what I'm really here to do.
You're the co-author of your life story. What's your storybook ending?
The last scene in, the biopic of my life is me getting on stage and doing the thing and speaking my truth, whether it's this project that I'm working on now or whether it's something in the future. It's I think that would be the culmination of, of everything, would be for me to just be on a stage or in presence of other people and using my voice. That's the final snapshot.